warm welcome to Sam Libs, who's going to speak on Theater is My Job. Sam?
Hi. Thanks to all of you for coming. First of all, I want to say how great it is to be back here in Ann Arbor. I mean, this school really made a huge impact on my life, and coming back here really feels like coming home. As Deb said, I majored in musical theater, and as many of you may know, the musical theater program here at Michigan has quite a reputation out in New York City. Whenever I tell someone that I majored in musical theater, I usually get a response like, "Oh, Michigan, yeah, one of those." And if you come to New York, you'll understand why, because 9 out of 10 Broadway shows have a Michigan alum in the cast. As Deb said, I'm in Cinderella. And since the show has opened, we have had 10 Michigan graduates, one of which being our choreographer and one being our assistant director. So it's really got quite a reputation. One of the things that I really loved about Michigan while I was here is that not only do they have this great musical theater program, but you get to interact with students from all different areas of study. And being in class with these people really made me realize how kind of isolated and secret our theater world is. You know, I would tell someone that I'm majoring in musical theater, and they would be like, "Wow, I didn't know you could get a degree in that." Or a lot of people would say, "Oh yeah, I used to do theater in high school." And, yeah, I'm still doing it, so that's cool. One of my favorite responses, though, I think, was I was getting my hair cut down at the Douglas J. Aveda Institute on Maynard Street. Some of you may know it. And the girl was cutting my hair. She found out I was majoring in musical theater, and she said, "Wow, that must be easy." And I was, and as wrong as she is, because it's certainly not easy, but I could see where she's coming from, because you think of college students and you see in your head sitting in a lecture hall with 200 other people, or, cramming for a final exam at 4 a.m. And of course, we still had to do all those things, but then we also had to do homework that consisted of learning a song that we'd never heard before and having to memorize it, come up with a backstory of who this person was and why he or she is singing this song, and be ready to perform it in front of the whole class the next day. So not only do we have to train our brains, but we also have to train our bodies. We take dance classes and voice lessons. We have to build up a facility so we can become physically the product that we want to sell. And theater has such a reputation of being such an unstable business. And we're warned of this all through college. Because no matter how talented a person is, no matter how good looking or charming, or how well they can dance, how high they can sing, how well they can land a joke, nothing guarantees them a job in this business. And a lot of people find that terrifying. And I kind of decided coming in that I was going to take that as a challenge. I was going to let it fuel me, inspire me. And so I worked really hard. And I moved to New York with this carefree attitude about it, that, I was just going to go, I was going to try everything, audition for everything, and just not be afraid to fail or ask for help when I needed it. And I think that was crucial, because the first 4 weeks that I was in New York were absolutely insane. We did our senior showcase, where a lot of agencies and casting directors will come to see if they want to hire people or represent people. And afterwards, I was running all over the city trying to meet with agents, go to auditions. I didn't have an iPhone yet, so I had this little planner that I got at the drugstore that I was keeping myself organized. I also didn't have GPS on my phone, so I had to write down the directions off my computer before leaving the house to go to these appointments. And everything was just happening so fast, and 6 weeks in, after being in the city for 6 weeks, I got a call from the agency that I had signed with, saying that I had booked an immediate replacement in the national tour of Wicked as ensemble understudying Fiyero. And I was sort of like, already? Like 6 weeks in? Wasn't that supposed to take a little longer? But no, I was leaving for Canada in 10 days, and I had to pack up my life into 2 suitcases and get on that plane. And, prior to that job, the longest run of a show I had done was 9 performances. And I was about to start doing 8 shows a week. And that is something no one can prepare you for. That's when theater becomes a job. And of course, my first show, I did what any normal person would do, and I posted on Facebook. I said, "Oh, I'm so grateful to be making my debut in Wicked. Hashtag dreams come true. Hashtag for good." But, 50 times of saying, "Look, it's Glinda!" You start to get a little tired. And yes, there are those days when you kind of don't want to go do the show. But thankfully, after doing a show that many times, it sort of becomes muscle memory. It's sort of like when you drive to work and you get there and you're like, wow, I really don't remember that drive at all. That's sort of what the show becomes. And it's not that you weren't focused while you were driving, because you certainly were. You just do it so many times, it just becomes your muscle memory. And so, I remember there was always this one part in the show. It was at the end of Act 1. How many of you have seen Wicked? Yeah. So the song Defying Gravity, a very iconic number. So in that scene, I was one of the guards that comes running on, and we're looking for the witch, and then she starts to fly up in the air, and we're all kind of thrown to the ground by her power. And then we have to just lie there for the rest of the song. So I'm lying there, and I'm in this coat that is made of green felt, and it weighs about 20 pounds, and I'm half covered with ground fog, and she's up in the air singing, and your mind just starts to drift. And I'd be laying there and thinking, oh yeah, it's Marissa's birthday today, and I didn't bring clothes. Well, maybe I can go back to the hotel after the show. No, because every time I go back to the hotel, I never leave. I better just go in my sweatpants. Look at her! She's wicked! Get her! People always ask me, has anything gone horribly, horribly wrong on stage? And the answer is absolutely. And that is where theater becomes the most fun, believe it or not. I remember we were doing the opening number, and for those of you who haven't seen the show, Glinda comes flying in on this bubble, and it's this big metal circle that she gets hooked into, and it has these 5 little machines that blow bubbles as she's flying across the stage. So, in the middle of the number, she gets out, and she tells this story about how the Wicked Witch was born and everything, and then at the end of the number, the bubble comes flying in to carry her away. And as the bubble was flying in, there was a glitch in the automation, and the bubble kind of goes like that, and the bubble juice just spills all over the stage. and they didn't stop the show because no one was hurt or nothing, no one was in it, so it was fine. But of course, people were slipping. One girl totally wiped out, and we're trying to finish this number without completely cracking up. And they didn't stop the show, so this pile of this very slippery bubble liquid is sitting on the stage, and we move into the next scene, which is sort of a jump back in time at when the Wicked Witch and Glinda are at college together. So we're all college kids coming to school for the first day of class, and the stage manager is handing us these wet towels to go clean up the mess. So we're walking on stage, oh, I'm so glad to be at school. Hi, it's so nice to meet you. Yeah, it's too bad the janitorial staff couldn't be here today. You just have to keep going, and that's what's so much fun about live theater. When you're in the ensemble of a show like Wicked, what usually happens is you sign a contract binding you to that show for 6 months, and then once those 6 months are up, you go open-ended, so you're welcome to stay with the show as long as the show lasts, and if you want to leave, you just have to give a 4 weeks notice. So my agents start calling after I've been with the show for 6 months, saying, we miss you, come back to New York, and they start getting me audition appointments. Now, auditions are funny because they usually happen with very little advance notice. And when you're in New York, that's no problem. You just grab your headshot resume, grab your book of music, and you get on the subway, you're there in 20 minutes. But when you're on the road, it's a little bit more of a process. So first of all, you have to get the day off, which they only let one guy and one girl leave at a time. So, there's a gamble. But if you do get the day off, you're still missing the show, so there goes a chunk of your paycheck. You have to buy a plane ticket, which you don't get reimbursed for. You have to find somewhere to stay, which usually ended up being my friend's couch in Washington Heights. And what usually happened is I would have to get up at 4 a.m., catch my 6 a.m. flight. I get into New York about 10, My audition would be around 11:30. I'd have to go right from the airport to the audition, all for this 5 minutes of my life that could change everything, or it could change absolutely nothing. And usually it changed absolutely nothing. But what it did do is it did make me realize how much I missed New York. Because I was only there for 6 weeks before I went on the road. I never got a chance to really become a New Yorker. And so I started to think about, my future on tour. I figured if I was there for a year, that'd be a good enough amount of time. So I decided I was going to leave that September, whether or not I had booked another job. So I did. I came back to the city, and I was loving life. I was going to auditions, I was seeing shows, I was seeing friends, and it was great. And then 2 weeks in, I got a call about immediate replacement Cinderella. Now, I had sent in a tape a few months prior, and I guess the creative team had dug up that tape and they'd watched it. They gave me some corrections. They wanted to see me in person. So I went to this audition expecting there to be, a handful of other guys there. I was the only one. So that was, crazy. Because, in a way the pressure was off because they clearly liked me and they clearly wanted to hire me. But at the same time, this was the make or break moment. This was the one chance I had to show them that I was ready to do this show. So with all that going through my head, I go into the room, I do the material, and the director kind of worked with me a little bit, gave me some corrections, and I walked out there feeling really good about the work I did. My agent called me later that night and said that they really loved me and they wanted me to come to the theater the next day for a costume fitting. Now here's where the business gets really crazy, because clearly the creative team wanted to hire me. I had done the work, I'd done a good job. But it could all be taken away if I didn't fit the costumes. And let me tell you, it was quite a nail biter. I got to the theater, and the guy I was replacing was about 3 inches shorter and about this big around. And so they zipped me up into this pants somehow, and they're like, "How does that feel?" I'm like, "Yeah, it feels great." And they're like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, maybe if I just don't breathe and don't bend over, it'll be fine." So I walked out there not knowing where it was going to go. And it didn't help that I didn't hear from my agents all night. I could barely sleep. But the next day I was walking down 8th Avenue and I got the call that I was making my Broadway debut in Cinderella. And I was so excited, and I was like, yeah, I was just on tour with Wicked, I know how this goes. And I figured they would be about the same. And that was a poor assumption. Because on tour, you go to these cities and the people who live there only have a handful of chances to see the show. And with a show like Wicked that is so popular all over the world, we were pretty much playing sold-out houses every night. On Broadway, it's a bit of a different story. Even in a show like Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, it's always rare to have a sold-out house. And we as musical theater actors sort of put Broadway on this pedestal, that once we get a Broadway show, we've made it. And, in a way that is true. But it really puts the instability of this business into perspective when you're doing a show for an audience that only fills about half of the theater. And, at any moment, that show could close, and you could be back at square one in a dance audition next to some kid who just moved to the city, and he could just as easily book that job instead of you. And one trick that producers use to keep a show open if it's kind of struggling is they'll bring in a pop star or a film star to play one of the leads to bring in, a big audience. And for those of you who don't know, we at Cinderella have two. We have Carly Rae Jepsen playing Cinderella, and we have Fran Drescher playing the Wicked stepmother. And, so nowadays people always ask me, how's Carly, how's Fran, is Fran a big diva? And honestly, they're both really good. And no, she's not a diva because, she's kind of out of her element. So she really needs that support to get her through the show. It's interesting, when we as actors in the ensemble have dedicated so much of our life to becoming a stage actor, and then working with a star who doesn't have a background in live theater, and they have to learn the ins and outs of the backstage world, like what a wing is, or what's, downstage and upstage and all this stuff. And it's just interesting. But I guess that's just the reality of commercial theater, that it doesn't really matter, that they had to change the keys or simplify the choreography. What matters is keeping the show open for us to stay employed. And I know some of you are thinking, that sounds like a really rough life. And why do I stick with it? And honestly, I think that's a question that we as actors have to ask ourselves all the time. Why do we stick with it? And I guess the best explanation that I've come up with is that I'm in this sort of soap opera-esque, long-term, seemingly dysfunctional relationship with my career. Because no matter how frustrated I get, no matter how many times I get down about not getting the part I wanted, or, giving up my entire Friday for a dance cleanup rehearsal, or even something like not being able to have a Bloody Mary with my Sunday brunch because I have to go do a matinee later. There are so many wonderful moments that so outweigh the bad. Like seeing mothers with their daughters sitting on their lap, being brought to tears by the finale of Cinderella. Or the adrenaline you feel when you have to find some way to make mopping up the stage, make it look like it's part of the scene. Or even just the fact that at any time, my life could change completely. That excites me so much. I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy, and honestly, yeah, I'm a little crazy. I think we're all a little crazy. You have to be a little crazy to be in this business. When I talk about the business to people, a lot of times they'll say, well, it sounds like you're happy. And yeah, absolutely, I'm so happy. But let's think about that word happy for a second. Because I think a lot of people view happiness as a time when they'll never have to do any work. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. True happiness comes when you find work that you really love doing. And that doesn't mean that you feel happy every day, but then there are these moments where you are so overcome with joy that you know that what you're doing is the only thing that can bring you that feeling. And that's what musical theater is for me. And to that girl at the Aveda Institute, no, it's not easy. It's really hard. And it's always going to be really hard. And I know that I've only been doing it for 2 years now as my full-time job. But those 2 years have solidified the feeling that this is the thing that will make me truly happy for the rest of my life. So to those challenges that I'm bound to face down the road, I say bring them on. Thanks so much.